The Baldwin County Public School System, considered one of the finest educational environments in the entire state of Alabama, has a history beginning in the latter part of the 18th century, when, as records indicate, Alabama's first public schoolhouse was built in the North Baldwin County community of Tensas in 1799. And at that time, nearly 10 years prior to Baldwin being organized as a county, the area remained geographically expanse. Agriculture served as king, and family farms dotted every section of the county. And in this era of extremely limited highway systems, individual communities built their own respective public schoolhouses, with the Board of Education supplying teachers to provide instruction. In the early part of the 20th century, the Baldwin County Public School System boasted over 80 separate school districts, each with their own individual public schoolhouse. And as time progressed, marked with improvements in transportation and engineering, numerous school districts were consolidated into nearby areas, leaving us today with very few of the original and historic public schoolhouses which distinguished Baldwin County, beginning in 1799, as the birthplace of Alabama's first public schoolhouse. This documentary, commissioned by the Honorable County Commissioners of Baldwin County and honorable members of the Baldwin County Board of Education, seeks to illuminate these few remaining and historic original public schoolhouses in an effort to pay tribute to one of the finest public school systems in Alabama.
Located in North Baldwin County, the original Perdido School was a one-room log schoolhouse established in 1885. As time progressed, this first facility was replaced with a two-room structure, which was improved to 3 in 1914, with the fourth classroom added in 1921. Thereafter, a larger school was soon needed, as many nearby smaller schoolhouses were consolidated into the Perdido School. Later in 1936, this beautiful building burned, and another was built in its place, which became a junior high school, accentuated with large columns at its front, which emphasized the prevailing architectural standards of the time. Unfortunately, years later, this facility was struck by lightning and also burned. Today, the Perdido School serves the elementary students of this expanse unincorporated area in North Baldwin County, and remains an important reminder of Perdido's past, as well as a historic landmark for future generations.
I don't think that I ever saw the school that was in existence in Perdido during 1935-36, but I know that during my time in high school, a fine building, a picture of which I have seen in later years, burned. One of my classmates was the daughter of the principal of the school, and I was acutely aware of that. It was replaced by a beautiful frame building. As far as sheer beauty is concerned, that building was, to me, it was what a schoolhouse ought to look like, a frame schoolhouse. There was a number of rooms and built according to the standard plan, but built of wood instead of masonry. The same standard plan with the auditorium in the usual spot, and office and storage room in the usual places. But it burned in the 80s one summer afternoon when we were having a school board meeting, and we got the word that lightning had struck Perdido School, and Perdido School was afire. And we adjourned the county school board meeting, and the whole Board of Education went up there and watched it burn. We got up there in time, just in time to see the front entrance collapse. The area firefighters were able to save one wing of it. We immediately went into the churches of the area. That was always our backup in time of trouble. The churches would come to our rescue, and we were able to incorporate that old wing into the structure of the new masonry building we built, and do it in a manner that was aesthetically pleasing. Also on the Perdido campus is the former Frisco Consolidated School, which was located in the community of Rayburn. It was a dead ringer for the Tenshaw School and the Lillian School. 2 rooms, little small room. We moved there during the push to get kindergarten room space, and it serves the school today. It's in the rear of the building. Perdido School campus is a large one, and it was put together piece by piece like most big school campuses. We got a small one, found another acreage available adjoining it at some later date, added that and added that and added that. And I remember trying to piece together the Perdido School campus, and I think we got an acre or two that I cannot find how we ever got title to it. I do believe that we simply encompassed somebody's acreage there, and he lost it in the middle of our Perdido campus. I don't know that, but I can't think of any other explanation why I can't find in any school records where we ever bought that particular acreage. We had a teacherage there. It was a good-looking building from outside, and it wasn't on the school campus, but it was immediately across the road from the school campus. Perfect place. Principals lived there for many years, but it was an old wooden building, 2-story, heated with a fireplace. Tried to heat it with space heaters, but you really couldn't heat it. In the desperate days of the Depression and later, when salaries were so low, a principal was glad to have that job up there because it did have a place for his family to live. But as times improved and the principal could do better, he moved across town, bought himself some land, built his own building, built his own home, and moved into it and left that vacant. We tried renting it. That was a fiasco, and finally sold it, which was the thing to do. And it almost immediately burned. I guess it was the last of the occupied teacherages that I knew. I guess it was the last one that was actually occupied by a school principal.
The community of Perdido on Highway 31 in Baldwin County has a rich heritage beginning in the 19th century. The community grew because of turpentine, steel growth, and lumbering, and some farming. With the onset of the railroad through the town, it experienced a boom at the beginning of the 20th century. At that time, there was a barbershop, a hair salon, a railroad depot where men would sit with their feet hanging off the edge waiting to see who would come off to the town that day. The first school in the community was actually a log cabin in 1885. And by the turn of the century, there was a schoolhouse in the Perdido area and one in the Tomley area. In 1914, the community members moved the school, the 2-room wooden school, from the cemetery location today on Cemetery Road up the hill to the current location of the Perdido School. They used mules and oxen and rolled the school on the logs that they had cut in the woods, and that is the current location today. Now, a new school replaced that one in 1922, but it burned in 1935. and a beautiful new building was built in 1935 to house the growing community students. In 1935, the building that was built was a 3-wing wooden frame building. Of that 1935 building, the southern wing is still in existence, and you can see it today as part of the school. Most of the school burned in 1985, but fortunately the wing that's been preserved still is a prime example of beautiful wainscoting, wooden ceilings, transom windows, and beautiful exterior building and architecture. In addition, the campus of Perdido School also houses the wooden frame building that served the Rabun community. That building was moved here intact and is still used today on the campus. Perdido School is actually a consolidation of more than 8 community schools in rural Baldwin County. Some of them being the Dias, which moved in 1930, Hall's Fork in 1948, and the Langham Lottie School, which was consolidated with Perdido in 1951. For most of its existence, Perdido School has served students grades 1 through 8 or 9. Therefore, it has been called Perdido Junior High School for most of its existence. Today, it is still the hub of the community and a backbone to all of the people who live here.
I was a student here beginning in the 1957 and finished up the 9th grade here. My mother was a student here also. We were from this area, and I went to high school, and after I finished college, and after I had taught for 7 years, I came back to Perdido to teach, and it has been a wonderful experience. It's still a good school. It's a small school. I enjoyed it as a student, with it being a small school. It's kind of rough being in a rural area all the time, but it was nice to have all your friends and to be related to a lot of them. And then when I came back to teach here, I found out things had changed a lot, but then again, there was still the love there. One of my favorite things that I remember when I came back as a teacher, I had taught in a larger school before I came here, and I was in the cafeteria line, and a small child was going to empty his tray, and he accidentally dumped it all over his clothes, and his eyes got big, and I said, oh no, somebody's going to get on to him. But Miss Jessie May came from around the counter with her dish towel, and she cleaned that little child up and loved him, petted him on the back, and he didn't have to feel like he had done something wrong. But that shocked me that day, because I was from a larger school as a teacher, and I just loved seeing that. And that's what we have here all the time. We have a lot of our workers that went to school here, so they've got the love for them. We have a lot of new people coming in, but it's still such a pleasure to be in this school. And my mother went here, and I went here, and I'm hoping that maybe my grandchildren will. All 3 of my children finished school here. So as you can tell, I'm all for Perdido. We used to have a candy store, we called it, and it was where we would go for recess, and they would to buy our little snacks, and it would get kind of crowded. When I was in 2nd grade, I loved we used to call them the 2-stick popsicles. The older children had to do the selling, and I never could order a purple one because I couldn't say purple real good, and they'd make fun of me. So I didn't get to get my purple popsicle until I got to where I could say purple a little bit better. But everybody knew each other, and I can remember one incident on the bus. A little boy got a little ratty with me, and my sister tore him up. She took care of him real quick with that. So most of my, things that were here when I was in school, there's not a whole lot I can remember. I had some good friends that I kept in touch with. I guess the one that sticks out in my mind mostly in my teaching career was the day that I got the call that the school was on fire. And that was in '85, and I was teaching in the old part of this school, and it was devastating to think that our beautiful old wooden school would be gone, and I didn't even have the nerve to come up here. My husband rushed up here immediately. My room was not damaged. I had a little bit of water damage, but I can remember just being devastated. I mean, it felt like, you know, you'd lost a member of your family, because the big old school had been here forever. It was a beautiful campus, and it was real hard to take. And but we bounced right back. The next year I was able to teach on campus again. It was in a real small classroom, but I didn't have to go to one of the churches anyway. And we bounced right back. We did just as much teaching as we'd have done if we'd have been in the building after it was rebuilt. And we were proud that it was rebuilt. We were a little bit afraid, since at one time in education they were thinking bigger was better, and we were afraid that our little school might want to just put us on in with the bigger school in Bay Minette. But it was such a joy when our principal, Mr. McDuffie, came to us in our meeting and he said, yes, they will rebuild. So that was quite a pleasure. One time when I was in the 2nd grade, Miss Lewis, a wonderful, sweet teacher, and we used, in the summertime, we could take our shoes off. We didn't come to school barefoot, but we could put them in the cloakroom. And I had taken my shoes off myself and a friend, and we was getting ready to go home, but we wasn't supposed to get up yet. There was a lot of order. She was a very strict teacher, and we weren't supposed to get up yet. Well, this friend of mine, we went on to get our shoes. It was just about time to go home, so we went to slip our shoes on. But anyway, she got on to us because we did not obey her, and it's funny that little things like that, but since I didn't have a whole lot of discipline problems, to me that was a big deal. So I thought I'd been a bad girl. So even the small area and going to the larger school of Bay Minette as a high school student was pretty difficult. Everybody there already had their groups, and so for the 3 years I was in high school, it was pretty tough because I wasn't used to the big things. And then when I went off to college and finished up, at first I didn't want to come back to Perdido because I felt, well, maybe I knew the people too well. I was related to a lot of them, and so I didn't request to come to Perdido. And so I taught for 7 years at Bay Minette at a larger school, and so coming back to teach here was like coming back home, and it was a whole lot of difference from the large school. Like I say, the caring was there, and that's simply because, you know, being small, everybody can look out for each other. So it was like coming back home for me, really. I guess my years in high school and college were the ones that were different for me, so I just came back home. I'm a resource teacher, so the children that come to me sometimes have already faced a little bit of failure. So when they come to me, they're needing some self-esteem, and so that's what I work on. And I had one particular student, and I started with him at 1st grade, and fell in love with him, and I was right there with him and helped him through everything that he had to do, and taught him somewhat. I didn't have him all day long. He went into the regular classroom some. But then whenever he graduated from high school, I was invited to go to his church. It wasn't the same church as I was, but I was invited to go to that church and sit with his family the morning he was recognized. That meant an awful lot to me because I did feel like he was part mine, and for them to recognize how much, you know, I had been in his life, that meant a lot to me. Also had another student somewhere along the line. When she graduated, instead of sending me an invitation and asking for a gift, she sent me a thank you note, and that meant an awful lot to me. And that all goes back to being, that doesn't mean that I'm some wonderful person. It's just that the small situation, you can get close to them and you can give them a lot more. And two, being in a small school, I have to stay with them year after year. We don't do that quite as much now because we're growing somewhat, but you really get to know the children, and it's not like you have them 1 year and pass them on, so I have a lot of time to learn to love them. So.
Well, it was after I'd graduated, and I guess lightning got it. I don't know. I'm pretty sure lightning started because nobody would have burnt the school. However, they did accused some people of doing it, but I don't think they did. When I first started in 1925, a man by the name of Vance, V-A-N-C-E, Vance, was a principal. Miss DeVore, D-E-V-O-R-E, was my first grade teacher. I remember that Miss Sherrill was a teacher, Miss Camp was a teacher, and a Phillips lady was a teacher. But an interesting thing was with Mr. Vance when he would have assembly. People don't know what assembly is now. It's when early in the morning when you all went to the auditorium, and he usually said a prayer and give a little talk. But Mr. Vance this day says that he didn't want anyone climbing the little oak tree in the backyard. Well, right after he got through talking, one of the classmates sailed right up the tree. Well, Mr. Vance always had a long cane that he either used to walk with or to pop you upside the head with. And he kept hitting old Curtis on the rear, and Curtis would go up. And he'd say, "Get down from that, Curtis." And Curtis said, "Well, you won't let me." He kept hitting him. But finally he got down. But I guess that's about the only thing that really, it was kind of comical. Then I had Mr. Bennett as a principal, and I had Mr. Huff. Mr. Huff stood out with me probably as one of the better teachers. Of course, Mr. Vance was a good teacher also, and so was Mr. Bennett. But Mr. Huff, he was a fine teacher. And
what did Mr. Huff teach?
He taught everything. He was the principal and the teacher. In them days, particularly English and literature, he was great at the literature. I was the poorest student in English they had, but he was great. They had mostly basketball was the big thing, and on May Day, we all was young and fast. We could run good, and the better ones of us would always go down, say to Loxley or somewhere for the May Day events. They had all running them days. Now I don't think they have anything like that. But the May Day was a good time for everybody. You could run, jump. Some of them was high jumpers and everything. Some was racers. I always liked to run, but some of them was pretty good jump 6 foot. Some of them could over the pole. They were pretty good.
In remembering my school days at Perdido Junior High School is what it was when I went to school here. Started in the 1st grade and went through the 9th grade. Graduated in 1965 from the 9th grade. But my main memory would start out with how to get here, because I grew up in the Lottie community about 9 miles from here. And the students in Lottie had to ride the school bus to get to Perdido, and we had to come rather early because that same bus that we rode from Lottie to Perdido would let us off, and then it would go on to Baymonette to be there by 8 o'clock. So normally I used to catch the school bus about 6:30. The bus driver, Mr. Casey Whittington, which you'll have a picture of, lived next door to me in Lottie. And then to get home in the evenings, we had to wait for the school bus because it had to come from Baymanette. So we didn't get to leave right at 3 o'clock. We played outside, and finally by the time we would get home to Lottie, it'd be around 4:30. So I'm not quite sure what the teachers did with us when we got here early, but I do remember in the afternoons we got to play outside. And I loved my time at Perdido. We had great teachers, we had small classes, we had great parent involvement. I remember going to the PTA meetings with the children would come along, and I guess someone entertained us while the parents and the teachers talked. I remember my first grade teacher, Miss Peavy, who was also Miss Ralph. She was a wonderful teacher. I do remember that one time she made me go stand in the corner for something I didn't think I should have had to do. But other than that, Miss Peavy was a great teacher, and she kept pictures of all of her students. I don't know where those are now, but Miss Peavy had a picture of every student she'd ever taught. And in the second grade, I had Miss Lewis. My main memory of Miss Lewis was that she told us one day to pray for snow. It was cold and we'd never seen snow, and so she advised us to pray for snow, and it snowed. That was my main highlight of the second grade. In the third grade, I had Miss Travewick, and I remember Miss Travewick, whose husband, Mr. Travewick, also taught at Perdido in the sixth grade, but Miss Travewick taught us cursive writing, where we learned to write instead of print. And along with remembering some of the teachers, I also remember the cafeteria workers, and I have a picture of them. And many of us that attended Perdido could remember the day we had homemade soup, because on the day that we had the homemade soup, we had homemade cinnamon rolls. And I can still smell those cinnamon rolls that those ladies made. And they made good peanut butter cookies from the commodity peanut butter that they got. Fourth grade, I had Miss Marjorie Dean, who was also from Lottie, and that was a split grade. There were 2 grades in one class. And in the 5th grade, I was in Miss Norris's classroom, and she also had a split grade, which meant she had 2 grades at the same time. And I marvel at those teachers that would have 2 grades in the same class. I ended up in my own teaching career later having to teach 2 grades at the same time, and I realize now how much work that was, because you basically had to have one group working on material while you worked with another. And so I thank both of those teachers who had those grades. My highlight, I remember, of the 4th grade, Miss Dean's class, we got to take a field trip to Atmore and ride on the fire engine. That was, I still remember that field trip. And I think I mixed up there because I had Miss Cook, I believe, for the 5th grade. Not real sure, I may be getting confused on that. Don't remember a lot about Miss Cook. And then in the 6th grade, I believe I had Miss Norris, who was just a wonderful teacher. And then, of course, when you got in high school, we had different teachers. Mr. McDuffie was the principal at that time. We played sports, and I used to try to play basketball. I wasn't very good in it. I was only in it because I was tall and I could be a guard. And I do remember we traveled to play basketball. We had some uniforms. We were the Raiders. And I remember playing in Bratt, Florida one time. And I was so excited. I finally got the ball, and I was so intent on making a score that I ran all the way down the court. And that is important because at that time girls played half court, which meant I wasn't supposed to cross the middle line. But I was so excited I ran the entire length of the court. But high school years were good. The night we graduated was very memorable. We graduated from the 9th grade, a small class. Of course, most of us went on to Baymanette, to a larger school for the 10th grade. But our 9th grade graduation in 1965, after the graduation, we had a party back in Lottie, the community where I lived, because there was a schoolhouse, the Langham Lottie Schoolhouse, that was now used as a community center. And after the graduation, when we started to cross over the railroad track to go up on the highway going to Lottie, we couldn't get over the railroad track, and that was the night of the big train derailment. And I remember having to go down side the railroad to another crossing further down to get over. We didn't quite know the extent of what that derailment meant at that time, but years later, most people realized that it was a tragic derailment that put out a lot of benzene, I believe, in the ground and was long lasting. But we had a great school. I think it shows you that you don't always have to have a lot of money to turn out great students. My classmates, if I started naming them off, I think that they all did well, even though we were a small class. And gosh, we even did all that without computers. So I'm trying to think of some other memories. During that time, my mother was a secretary for the school at one time, and later on she also taught here. Now, I think that was not while I was a student, that was later. But in my family, of course, I had nieces that went on to go to school here and nephews, and then I had nieces that went on to teach school here, and I think you'll see that happen a lot, that people that went through this school loved it so much that they wanted to come back and take part in it and be teachers as well. The library, of course, was always a good part of the school, and being able to take books home and read meant a lot for people in rural North Baldwin County. I particularly remember the Horton books about Horton. Some of the Dr. Seuss books were really neat. I remember in high school we took home economics. Best I can remember, the boys and the girls took home economics together. Mrs. Bailey was the home ec teacher when I was here, and it seems like I recall us preparing a meal where the boys did one thing and the girls did another. I can't remember that. This room I'm in now has a little small room that you can go in, the cloak room. I guess we stored coats and things there, but I won't mention any names, but we had some students that sort of made the habit of going in the cloak room, and this particular cloak room, somehow there was a window, you know, where you could look and hang out the window. And I remember we had two of our classmates that were sort of hanging out the window looking at things. And if I'm remembering this correctly, you know, things grow with time. But Ms. Cook mentioned to the rest of the class, you know, they didn't think she saw them, that they were up there kind of hanging around looking out the window. And so this was in the days when you could get a paddling. And so she said, shh, to all of us, and she kind of came up behind them and gave them a little pat with the paddle. That was one of my memories of that class. I'm sure it wasn't anything that hurt anything but their pride, but I do remember that. And I remember with riding the school bus, we were still on dirt roads then, and so the bus would get stuck. And particularly when we transferred on to Baymonette, they would know the kids that came from Lottie and Perdido, because sometimes on that road the bus would get stuck and we'd have to all get out, and we'd come in and have red dirt and all on our clothes where that happened. My mother, Mary Biggs, was part of the school here at Perdido when I was in those high school grades, 64 along in there. She was teaching first grade, so that was an added little bonus with Mother being a teacher. I got to ride to school in a car. Didn't have to ride the bus those times, so I was fortunate that she set a good example in education, and I went on and was involved in education as well.
I remember when I started in the first grade, and my teacher was Miss Katie Halbert. And then went through the second, I believe I was in the third when the schoolhouse burnt the first time in '35. And I went to school down at the Baptist Church. Finished out that year. And then Miss Rupel was a teacher the third year. Yes, I remember when I got my first whipping in school, it was Miss Rupel. I don't remember her first name. She just died here about this past year. We was just fighting. We'd fight every time we got together in school, just about it. And she called us that day, and she had a little study room in the corner of one end of the church, and she carried me and then got me first, and then got him. And I got burnt the next year. I was burning grass at home and had a pair of overalls burned off of me. And I missed that year of school. And I like to died from it. I still got scars all over me from it. And it had been raining a few days before, and there was a mud hole in the backyard, and my mother rolled me in that mud hole, let her put it out.
I remember my first grade class at Perdido Junior High School. Miss Florence Ralph was my first grade teacher. She was not married at that time. And I was about the smallest person in her class. I was very, very small. And I was very, very mischievous. And most of the time when a child misbehaved in her class, she would make them stand at the blackboard with their nose in a ring. But I was so short, she stood me in the hall. I had to stand in the hall a lot. And her classroom was directly over the lunchroom, which was underneath. We had to go downstairs to go to lunch. And when you went down the stairs, you had to line up, be in order, wash your hands. They had a long metal trough-like contraption down there with a pipe run all the way, the length of the thing to wash your hands. I mean, the water flowed out of the little pipes. You didn't choose your food. When you passed through the line, the cooks, Miss Effie McCoy, Miss Wilson, and I believe that was the only two at the time in my first grade. They served your plate, and you went to your table, you sat down, you did not talk, you finished your lunch, and then everyone was told to line up, and we would go back out the side door and go up the tall steps. I thought that was the tallest bunch of steps going back up to the classroom. But we could not, anyone go up until the teacher gave us the okay. And the second grade teacher was Miss Elizabeth Lewis. And the thing I remembered about her, I was the teacher's pet. She let me sit in her lap a lot. She would hold me in her lap because I was so small. And she adopted two little girls while I was in her class. And I remember her bringing them to the school to let us see them. And I thought they were the prettiest little babies I'd ever seen. And I had a lot of third grade teachers, a lot of substitutes. I do not remember even who my permanent teacher was. But I do know that Miss Laney Blair, and by the way, she was another one that worked in the lunchroom. She was my substitute teacher some in the third grade. Miss Gloria Bird was one of my substitute teachers. And my fourth grade teacher was Miss Berry, Miss Sue Berry. And my fifth grade teacher, I guess I didn't have a lot to remember in the fourth grade, but they had a third and fourth grade combination. They had a fifth and sixth grade combination classroom, and I was not in either of those. I was blessed not to be in a combination class. And my 5th grade teacher was Miss Sadie Oakes. She also was an unmarried lady. And my 6th grade teacher was Mr. Archie Trawick. He was a very good math teacher, very strict, and our school was very quiet. No one was allowed in the halls. You did not see children running up and down the halls. And we had wood floors. I came to school many days without shoes, and I had a lot of splinters in my feet. I remember those very well. And then we went into the 7th grade. Miss Gladys Gann was my 7th grade teacher. She was a very sweet lady, very good teacher. She did not allow any foolishness in her classroom. And we always had homework. And we always better have it done when we got back in her class the next day. Another one of my teachers in junior high school was Mr. Taunton. I do not remember his first name. I just know we had to call him Mr. Taunton. And Miss Gladys Gann was also our home economics teacher. But we did not have a mixed class of boys and girls. It was just girls. And we learned to sew, and we learned to cook. And I remember my first school bus driver that I rode to school on the school bus was Mr. Jim Mothershed. And I remember the bus had the seats were down the middle with a rod to hold on to. And there was some on the side, but they did have seats down through the middle of the bus. And many times it would be so cold, the old bus would stop, and we'd be a little bit late getting to school, but we made it. And the first 6 years of my schooling, I had perfect attendance. I did not miss any days of school. And we did have Halloween carnivals out here, but due to the church I was in, we were not allowed to come to Halloween carnivals. But when I got a little older, I did come, and it was a lot of fun. And there was many people out here. The school would be full of people. And my grandfather also drove a bus out here, Will Fretwell. And my mother was a substitute bus driver some when he was sick at several different times. But in the 9th grade, we did not have to take like the test they have to take now to go into. We considered senior high then 10th, 11th, and 12th because we had to go to Bay Minette to complete those grades. But after the school burned here, then they left off 9th grade and just it goes to 8th grade now. And you have to go the 4 grades in Bay Minette now. And we had beautiful graduation ceremonies. And my brother was 2 years older than I was. He was the salutatorian of his class here. I didn't make it to be salutatorian, but I made good grades. I made very good grades. But I enjoyed going to school. Didn't want to miss. Just liked school. Well, we tried to pull a prank on our 6th grade teacher, Mr. Trawick, once, and he taught us how to play a harmonica. And we were all just cutting up one day, and he made every one of us stand in the hall. And it was on the outside of the door. His classroom was on the outside of the door on the west end of the school. And then he went and got the principal and brought him down there, let us see all of us standing out in the hall, and we got a good chewing out that day. But he just did it in fun. We had one boy in there that thought he could be bigger than the teacher a couple of times, but Mr. Trawick was very strict, so he showed him who was boss. And he probably couldn't do that today, but he did it then. But I appreciated all of my teachers. there used to be in Mr. Trawick's classroom, there used to be a shop down underneath it. That was the only two parts of the school. The lunchroom and the shop was the only two parts of the school that were underneath another part of the building. And I remember the fence over near the shop, and there was a ladder that went from one side of the fence to the other, and we had to climb over that fence if we went out the front door of the school. We had to climb over that fence to go out to the playground. And you should see a bunch of children trying to go over that one little ladder.
I started school here in 1933 in the first grade. Miss Katie Howard was my teacher, but I was not allowed to stay here. They sent me back to the little school nearer to my home in Raven. But I came back out here in the second grade. We had a new principal. Mr. John Huff had started the principal then, and he too sent me back to Raven. So I went through fifth grade in Raven, as I was from that community more, and then came back in the seventh grade and went through the ninth here. And we thought we had the best school in the world, and I'm still of that opinion. I'm looking around in this room, and it's so full of memories still, it just makes me want to stay a while. Our science teacher was a little bit raunchy sometimes. And one day he left us in the room by ourselves, and he had just hurt one of my friends feeling so bad, and I said, Mr. Robinson is just as hateful as a turkey buzzard. Well, about that time he got back, and one of the boys piped up and said, Thursia said you are a turkey buzzard. I said, I did not. I said you're as hateful as one. And he said, let's go to the office. We went to the office, and the boy went too. He said, now what's all this about? I said, well, you hurt her feelings real bad. He said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. So we went to lunch together that day, and I was the hero of the class for a while. Anybody that would stand up to Mr. Robertson had to be pretty good. But we had marvelous teachers. Another memory I have in here, you talk about a teacher having authority. One of the boys was goofing off, and she had a geography book. Miss Abby Sherrill, she walked back and she creamed him on his head. He didn't cause any more trouble. That was the end. That was over and out. But there was capital punishment. It wasn't always fair, but we were good students for the most part, and we had good teachers. I remember when the war came, 1942. We got to school the next day after Pearl Harbor, which happened on Sunday evening. And our principal gathered us all in the auditorium, and we listened to President Roosevelt as he declared war on Japan. It was a sad, sad day. And then some of our men went right away, some of our classmates. In fact, one of the boys out of this class died in Germany in the war. We had so many of our men. Even my older brother went, although he was like 33, 34 years old and had a family, but they still went. And everybody was very patriotic and tried to do everything they could. And that's when people started going to Mobile to work in the shipyard and in the Brooklyn field. And a lot of people went and stayed in Mobile, but they come home on the weekend. The schools had many substitute teachers during that time. All the men, of course, were called into the service, most of them. But it was up until this time, the lady teachers had to wear hose to school every day. And we remembered that changed during the war. They could wear anklet socks like we did. That was quite a come up for them. They could wear socks to school. The dress code wasn't necessary because people dressed about like we were raised to dress, and that was very modest. And we had a good ball team and just a lot of things to enjoy. The schools were very much a part of this entire community, We all went to church together. In fact, when the school burned in 1935 and they built the new school, they didn't miss school that year. The churches opened their doors and the students were carried to different churches in the area. And then when it burned again in '84, well, it was still a makeshift, but it never lost too much time. It was wonderful that when they consolidated the schools, because back in the 30s, there was no way to go to school but to walk. My two brothers had a little jenny that they rode. The only thing, one day Melzy tapped the old little horse on the back, make him hurry up, and he jumped this way, and the boys went backwards. He dumped them in the road, but we had to walk. The school buses, when they started getting dim, they didn't have glass windows. We had tarp flaps that they tied down. And boy, it was something else, riding in the wintertime with those pieces of canvas for windows. The school here was cold part of the time, and it was always hot because we didn't even have a fan. And you stick about 40 people in this room, it got a little warm, but we made it. It was fine. Mr. Huff stayed several years. His daughter Pauline taught here, one of the best English teachers. When we went to Bay Minette, the teachers in Bay Minette said, we can tell a Perdido student when they get to Bay Minette, they've had Miss Huff for a teacher. And she was a wonderful teacher. So the years went by and Mr. Huff left and Mr. Mosley came in, and then from there on up. So all in all, the school has been a very important part of this community and still is, and we do appreciate all the efforts that people make to make it even better. I remember one thing that was so humorous, the science teacher, Mr. Robertson, got married. He was the board down. We had a little two-story building right off the campus here where the principal lived. And he was going to rent the upstairs bedroom and bath with kitchen privileges. The only thing is that he thought his bride was coming into one place and he went to another thinking that would be where she was, and she was mad as she could be when he did finally find her. But she was the first drama teacher that we ever had. She loved to teach drama, so that started a whole new can of worms around here. People were having programs, and she taught a lot of things that we'd never known before. Our Perdido boys were well known for being pranksters, and of course they had plenty of company down there. But this particular teacher, her husband was in service. Her sister was she was just a legend in that school. But the younger teacher was a little bit hard, so one morning she really got a surprise. She opened her desk, and when she pulled it open, there's a little possum sitting in there. And I don't know if you know what possums do or not, but they blow at you when you confront them. And that's the day she pitched a fit. She grabbed her purse and went by her sister's room. She said, I wouldn't stay here and teach this bunch. I think she called them rednecks or whatever. Miss Leonard was the well-known teacher in Bay Minette, so she helped her leave. And another one of the girls one day went into school and she said, Miss Leonard, I have something that's just running me crazy. My fingers are itchy. And she says, well, you must go down and let Dr. McLeod see what's wrong. So you could walk right on down to Dr. McLeod's office in downtown. Came back the next morning, Miss Leonard says, well, Lillian, did you find out what's wrong with your fingers? She said, yes, he told me I have scabies. She didn't know what that was. So she said, what are scabies, Miss Leonard? One of the students piped up and said, that's a 7-year itch. And nobody wanted to sit by her because it's contagious. And it wasn't all dull. I'll tell you, we had a lot. I remember Miss Leonard, the boys in her class, and Johnny Stacy was one of them, he's a pharmacist in Bay Minette. They write their formulas in their hand. I watched them. And they'd sit up there, and Miss Leonard said, that's all right, boys, just go ahead and cheat. when you get to Auburn, see if you can get by with it. She didn't bother them. She just let them have to stew in their own juice. But they were good teachers. One of the girls brought in the first cardboard milk carton we'd ever seen. Milk was in bottles, glass bottles. And she had a visitor, or she went visiting maybe to New York or somewhere, and she brought in the first disposable cardboard milk carton we'd ever seen. So I am anxious. I'll be 80 next week.